All right, so let's get into it. Today, we're not just talking about getting a new pet. No, we're talking about the act of creating an entire, self-contained universe and then appointing yourself as its one and only god. This is your beginner's guide to becoming a lizard god.
You know, it all starts here. In the grand scheme of things, the cosmos is just this vast, cold, and profoundly indifferent place. It really wasn't designed for comfort. It wasn't designed for, well, much of anything besides just chaos.
And then there's us. In the face of all that cosmic indifference, we humans do something that is, when you think about it, truly bizarre. We find these little creatures, these micro-dinosaurs, who evolved over millions of years to thrive under the intense glare of a star, and we decide, you know what, I'm gonna put one in a glass box in my living room. It's a pretty wild thing to do.
And that gets us to the most important point. For that one little animal, you control everything. The sun, the seasons, the rain, the food. You are its entire reality. The problem, as our source material from Krawlo points out, is that most of us new gods are, frankly, terrible at the job. So what happens when that divine power meets a few beginner mistakes? Well, the consequences can be pretty catastrophic. And unfortunately for the lizard, it often involves their bones literally turning to rubber.
So let's look at the two most common divine blunders. Now, these aren't acts of malice or anything like that. They're really just acts of ignorance. And they come down to a basic misunderstanding of physics and psychology.
First up, the physics problem. Lizards need a very specific, invisible kind of light called UVB. It's what lets them process calcium. Without it, their internal bone factory just shuts down. Their entire skeleton starts to soften, their jaw turns to putty, and they get something called metabolic bone disease. The source is crystal clear on this. This is the single most common and most preventable disease in pet reptiles. It's a slow, painful system failure, all caused by using the wrong kind of sun. The second mistake is more of a psychological one. We feel lonely, so we assume our lizard must be lonely too. We think it needs a friend, a roommate, someone to cuddle with. And this is a catastrophic miscalculation. And what's so fascinating about this slide is how it breaks down that disconnect. What you see as getting your lizard a friend, your lizard sees as a direct competitor for heat, for food, for territory. What you think looks like cuddling is actually an act of dominance, one lizard literally blocking the other from the life-giving sun. And companionship? Well, to most of these solitary lizards, that just means a constant source of stress, a potential threat, or, in some cases, a conveniently sized snack. But here is the good news. You don't have to be a terrible god. With just a little bit of cosmic engineering, you can build a perfect, thriving little universe for your tiny dinosaur. Let me show you how. Really, it all comes down to following 3 simple, non-negotiable commandments. If you get these right, you are going to prevent the vast majority of problems before they ever even have a chance to start. Okay, commandment number 1, you must build a sun and a shade. See, lizards are cold-blooded. They can't make their own heat. They have to physically move their bodies around to control their temperature. And as the data from Krawlo shows, this means you need a hot basking zone, think of it like a solar oven, and a totally separate cooler zone where they can go to retreat. For a bearded dragon, that's a blistering 115 degrees on one side and a comfy 75 on the other. This temperature gradient isn't a luxury. It is absolutely essential for digestion, for activity, and for life itself. Commandment number 2, you have to install the bone maker, and this right here is the biggest technical failure people make. You can't just use a regular light bulb. It has to be a reptile-specific UVB bulb. Those lights for plants or for aquariums, they produce absolutely zero UVB. And, crucially, you can't just stick that bulb on top of a glass or plastic lid, because glass blocks 100% of those vital rays. And here's the real trap. The UVB output fades over time, but the light still looks like it's on. So even if it still glows, you have to replace that bulb every 12 months, like clockwork. And the third and final commandment is the simplest of all. With very, very few exceptions for super advanced keepers, your lizard god must declare solitary rule. Most of the popular pet species are territorial. They live their entire lives alone. For their health, for their well-being, you have to honor that. House them by themselves, period. So we've covered the technical duties of being a deity, but what's the point, right? Why go through all this trouble to create a perfect little world inside a glass box? Well, let's zoom back out for a second. In the grand cosmic sense, None of this matters. The stars are going to burn out whether your leopard gecko has the right humidity or not. The universe is completely, utterly indifferent to all your hard work. And yet, for that one animal, these little details are everything. Your choices, your engineering, your attention to detail, that is the totality of its existence. You are either its benevolent son or you're the careless void.
So the act of meticulously managing heat and light and humidity, that seemingly absurd little ritual of dusting a cricket with special vitamin powder before you serve it, that's not just a chore. In the face of a chaotic universe, it is a small, deliberate act of creating comfort and safety and order. And honestly, that is a profoundly meaningful way to spend your time.
So we've covered the core principles of being a good lizard god. But as the Krawlo article shows, there are definitely a few more divine errors that a new deity can make. The full source material actually outlines 10 major mistakes. We've gone over some of the biggest ones, but every single one of them is pretty critical for the health of that tiny universe you're in charge of.
These include other pitfalls like using an enclosure that's way too small, choosing a dangerous substrate like calcium sand that can cause fatal blockages, feeding the wrong ratio of greens to insects, or using those red nightlights that actually mess up their sleep cycles. Each one is a totally avoidable tragedy. So, if you're ready to take your divine responsibility seriously and make sure the world you've created is a paradise, not a prison, your best next step is to read the full handbook. You can find the complete guide on Krawlo just by clicking the link in the description. And that really leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? In a universe that's defined by its vastness and its apathy, taking the time to meticulously engineer one small, perfect, comfortable world for a single creature, well, that might just be one of the most meaningful things a person can do.